This video will walk you through how to place the pulley at the right height on the motor. You'll also attach the idler for the pulley. The pulley is attached to this motor, which is attached to the YZ plate. You need one M4 16mm button screw, 2 of the 624 bearings, 1 washer, and the YZ plate. First, you're going to take the screw and you're going to put both of the bearings on top of it. Just set them in there side by side, and the belt will eventually wrap over this idler. And then we're going to put the washer at the very end, so this will be ready to mount to the plate. Your idler should look like this: 2 bearings and a washer on the screw. Orient the YZ plate the way you see here. The motor should be on the right hand side, these 2 feet pointing downward. The idler is going to go in this hole here, and you can just tighten it by hand first and then tighten it with an Allen wrench afterwards. When you do use that Allen wrench, just get it snug. Don't over tighten this. You want to make sure that those bearings still spin freely. Shouldn't be any drag. The belt is going to make these spin, so you want them to spin freely. Next, you need one of the small motors. If your kit came with all the same size motor, just grab any of your 4 motors. 1 GT2 pulley, 3 of the M3 22mm button screws, the Z-axis nut, and the 16mm nylon spacer. Also, if you have THREADLOCKER, there's a great opportunity to apply THREADLOCKER during this step. If you use THREADLOCKER, you want to make sure you use a removable strength THREADLOCKER, such as THREADLOCKER Blue. Here I have one of my small motors, and what's important is to identify the flat side of that motor shaft. So find the flat side. You're going to want to line up one of the screws from the pulley to that flat side. So just lay it down so you can see the flat side, and then take one of your pulleys, and you're just going to slide it over the motor shaft so one of the 2 screws lines up with that flat side. That's all you need to do. You can't quite guess the height just yet, so we're going to do a little bit of a check to find out how high to set this. To check that height, I'm just going to stack it together how it's going to eventually be screwed together. So the Z-nut, I'm just going to place on one side here, and I'm going to place the nylon spacer, and this is just so I can stack this plate on top and then look at it from the side and determine the height of the pulley. Once you have it stacked, just get eye level with it so you can determine the height. Here you can see I've placed mine on its side just so that it's easier for the camera. I want to nudge this down so that that rim is just above the idler. I want the teeth to go to the full edge of the idler there, just like this. Set the plate aside carefully so that you still have the pulley at the right position. Tighten down one of the set screws. We want to make sure that we have the height as perfect as we can get it. Make this snug so that it doesn't slide when you pull on it. With one screw holding the pulley in place, I want to check the height, so I'm going to take the Z-nut and I'm just going to stack it next to the motor and just check the height. I want to make sure you can see the rim goes just past the idler, the teeth go all the way to the edge of the idler. With my pulley at the correct height, and it's also on here nice and snug that it won't slide free, I want to go ahead and keep that one on the flat side where it's at, but I want to take the other set screw out and apply THREADLOCKER to this one. So just grab an Allen wrench and remove it. With the set screw still in the end of the Allen wrench, just take some THREADLOCKER and just dab a little droplet of it onto the threads itself. You don't have to overcoat it, just enough to get it all wet. With the THREADLOCKER applied, I'm ready to replace this set screw back where it came from. At this point, you do want to tighten this so that it's very firm. The point of having the THREADLOCKER is so that this doesn't wiggle free with vibrations, so you might as well tighten this down well. You may notice there's a little blue ring around where the screw went in. If you have more than just a blue ring, if it's dripping over the sides, clean it up immediately. With that screw holding everything firmly in place, you can now rotate the pulley, pull out the other set screw, and repeat the process with THREADLOCKER. And again, remember to tighten this so that it's very firm, but don't over tighten it because you can bend the tool. At this point, you want to grab the motor and position it with the plug to the right hand side. You're going to take the Z-nut and you want to make sure that the thinner side where that screw opening is, the thinner side goes towards the body of the motor. Again, beside that circle opening, one side is thinner. The thinner side needs to be up against the motor. Here you can also see that opening is to the right of the pulley when oriented this way. This little nylon spacer is going to go down here in the left corner. At this point, you can take the YZ plate and set it on top. You are going to have to push around those spacers just a bit to make sure you can see all the holes line up, and then drop your screws through the holes. At this point, you can start tightening down those 3 screws, but don't tighten them all the way. Just tighten them so they get started. Make sure that it grips the motor, and then move on. Get all 3 of them started before you tighten them all the way down. So here's why I recommend just starting all 3 screws instead of tightening them all the way. Is one of my screws here, I couldn't get started, and so I need to pick it up and sort of flex things just a bit so I can see where that screw is coming through and line it up to the hole. And then once I have all 3 started, then I can go ahead and tighten it all the way. Once you've tightened it all the way, it should be flush to the motor. There should be no gap here between the motor and the Z-nut. Although this isn't attached at this step, you can see how the belt actually runs through the pulley and the idler that you just installed.